tonight.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
might
go ahead.
take a minute. This might take a minute or two as well.
If I can find it.
Okay, we are live. We are live streaming.
Okay. So we want to start the meeting, and again, say that adequate notice has been given. I want to say before we start the pledge, just that we're sorry we're starting a little bit late, and that there are a number of folks who are having Zoom issues tonight. So hopefully, if people come in or out, we'll just work with it as we need to. So I see the flag in back of Sean. So we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
United States of America
and
to the republic
for which it
stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all. Okay, thanks everybody. Typically we would go to recognizing our own, and this would be, if we were meeting in person, just a reminder, this would be a joint meeting with the city. However, we're not having a joint meeting with the city today. We are going to have later a presentation by Patty DeForest, but so we're actually moving straight to a superintendent update. So Sean.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Well, good evening, everyone. Again, we apologize to the community since we were delayed a little bit tonight. We are a community that's built on strong relationships, and we know that relationships are integral to our student success. We know that by investing in our students and having good relationships with them, we understand their perspectives, and we're able to provide personalized learning to them and pertinent differentiation for them. One of the things that's unique in the city of Clayton is that we have a strong relationship with the city, and we are connected with them. We're collaborative in varied ways, where we serve on committees with one another, we participate in certain projects with one another, and our biggest collaboration is the Center of Clayton. The center is an asset to the community, and it's also a benefit to the students of the district. Over the last few years, we've been able to look at ways that we've been able to invest and improve the Center of Clayton and make it even stronger. And for our Clayton students, we've been able to increase the hours for them and able to provide passes for our 7th grade students, and created a workout space that is completely state-of-the-art for our athletes and our students who participate in other programs. We have benefited from this partnership. We are now faced with the challenge and impact of COVID-19 and its impact on the Center of Clayton, which has caused us to think more about how we need to invest in the sustainability of the center, which I believe is a very worthy investment. Tonight, tonight we're going to have an opportunity to kind of get the state of the Center of Clayton from Patty DeForest, and we're very fortunate to have her here. And she is going to give us a little bit of update, and then the board is going to be asked to approve the budget concerning the Center of Clayton. But before we get into the center, I wanted just to take some time to update the board on our remote learning. And again, I'm continuing to be impressed by our educators who have really made this experience very different than it was in the spring. We have continued to make decisions in the best interest of our students and staff, making sure that we're using data to inform our decisions. We also know that in order for this to be highly successful, we know that our parents also are partnering with the district, because we also have to recognize that this is very difficult for them. But we do feel it's the right decision, and we feel it's what's best to keep our students and staff safe. I will have to say that I'm proud that we're a district that has been thoughtful about differentiating support for our students based on their needs. And since the first day of school, we have been providing in-person learning for students. And I commend our special education teachers who are true heroes to this work. We've also started to have, started to expand that support to other students who have additional needs. And we're building capacity within our buildings. And today, the county executive made an announcement that he recommends that school districts to consider bringing younger students back to school. So over the last few weeks, even before this announcement, we have been preparing for an opportunity to bring our youngest learners back into the schools. And we've been working with building leaders to look at different plans that we can enact and put in place if we were feeling that it was safe for our students to be back in school. And part of those plans incorporate an orientation and also a timeline that would allow us to bring students back in, at certain points and gradually get our students fully back into school. We will also make sure that even though that announcement was made today, we're going to make sure that we're providing time and space so that way we can get enough time to prepare for that transition and also make sure that we're absolutely ready. Sam Page has also recommended that schools had some recommendations around sports. We are able to start with competitions for low contact sports, which includes golf, tennis, and cross country, but we can only continue to have practices for moderate and high impact sports with precautions in place and no timelines have been set for competitions. So those announcements were made today, and we will continue to use those recommendations to inform what we do in the district. The other thing that's important to remember is our work around equity, and we are going to make sure that we make it a guaranteed topic that we bring up at every meeting. And so I wanted just to let the board know that all of our certified staff have participated in anti-bias training before the beginning of the school year. And just recently, all of our classified staff have participated in that training. And that when we talk about classified staff, we talk about support staff who still have interactions with our students and parents and our staff. Our director of equity and inclusion Cameron Poole, has been meeting with principals and preparing equity audits within the schools. And he's also getting other pertinent information that's going to inform the development of our district equity committee. The other thing I had the privilege of doing last Friday during our professional development day was to observe Dr. Cameron, Mr. Poole, he'll be doctor soon at some point. He did a presentation on the power of humanization. And it was a really incredible presentation, but he talks about how sometimes within systems, we inadvertently are dehumanizing people. And he even used such a strong term such as soul murder. And it is a strong term, but it does mean that, thinking about how this has an impact on our students and their identity and how they feel. And I loved how he put it to the broader perspective in terms of society, in terms of how things are working in the community and how that then he brought it back into education. And he talked about the importance of looking at discipline data, making sure we're getting student voice, making sure that we need teacher familiarity and students seeing themselves in our staff, the importance of looking at academics and relationships and participations in programs. And what's great is that so many of those things are connected to our strategic plan that we're going to talk about later. The other thing that he emphasizes is the importance of collecting data on our social emotional learning, which is connected to our work around equity. And so you'll also see that connection to our strategic plan. Cameron has also been working with has been working with our staff and developing. He's going to start developing affinity groups, which is going to be for our students and for our parents and for our staff, which is going to allow a safe space for them to have conversations about their experiences. So I just gave you a lot of information around COVID, the pandemic, about our equity work, and then just kind of setting the stage for what we're going to see around the center of Clayton tonight. I am going to turn it over to Caitlin to see if she has any updates from the student perspective.
Yes, so for some updates from the student perspective, I can tell you a little bit about how extracurriculars and sports have been these first 2 weeks of school. So the extracurriculars that are graded classes have started the first week of school. For example, Globe has been meeting twice weekly in the mornings. And for Globe, this month's cover story is profiling the Black Lives Matter movement in St. Louis. And another article that you may find interesting that will be in this month's issue will be what students are thinking of the new schedule for virtual learning. Extracurriculars have found a way to connect with current events in the US, which has been helpful to individualize learning for students. Also, other student-run clubs are waiting until after the virtual clubs fair that Ms. Young set up to begin their meetings, and the clubs fair will be tomorrow from 3 to 4 p.m. As for sports, tryouts happened last week, and students have been excited to get back to sports, although unconventionally. And I will also share my screen and show you a walkthrough of my biology and my history classes. So this is my AP Biology classroom, and there are two different categories here, stream and classwork. So stream contains the announcements, and most of the teachers, based on the feedback that they heard, decided to keep the stream just announcements and put their assignments in classroom. And a lot of things that teachers have been utilizing are like these different emojis to organize the classes. So here, Mr. Bergeron uses a pointer finger for announcements, a fire emoji for homework, a book emoji for notes, a pencil and paper for in-class activities, and then also labs and a computer for assessments. Something else interesting is that in World History also uses the classwork tab, and they use weekly hyper slides, and these have the agenda and link all of the presentations that were used that day in class, in addition to having the homework linked below. So everything for the week is on this organizer. In addition, there's also an objectives tab, which helps the students keep in mind the goals that they are learning for that week. And teachers have also been using interactive methods, like, for example, Pear Deck, which is an interactive slides program. And then they have been using Zoom breakout rooms to help with smaller group discussions.
Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you, Sean. So we're going to actually, so just as a, this meeting is we're going to do a study item, then an action item, then we're going to go back to an information item and study item. So the flow is going to be a little bit different because Patty DeForest is going to give us an update on the Center of Clayton, and we want to just, out of respect to her, allow her to give her update. We can ask some questions, and then we're actually going to have an action item that she'll be a part of, and then we'll just release her so she doesn't have to be part of the whole meeting. So I just wanted to explain that to you all. So our next item is 4.01, which is the Clayton Recreation, Sports and Wellness Commission, or the CRSWC, annual update in the budget for fiscal year 2020/2021. So I don't know, Patty, you're our Mary Jo, you're going to set it up, or Patty and Mary Jo?
Yeah, I think Patty has issues.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. So I'll just go ahead and speak. First of all, Caitlin, if you're still on, thank you, because my grandchildren will not show me that. how in school or virtual learning works. I've asked them to show me in their life. They just look at me like, you don't need to know, Nana, you're not in school. So I appreciate seeing that. So we're going to talk about the CRSWC. I'm going to give you a presentation. Mary Jo, feel free to jump in at any point. I'm going to share my screen and go through it's sort of as those of you that have been on the board before now, we usually give you an update on things that have happened, and then we talk about the budget and share that. I'm going to do sort of an update on where we are and how we develop the budget, and then we'll talk about the budget. And then I have some slides at the end to talk about things that we still haven't decided that the three committees at the center will be really working through over the next couple of months. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, there it is. And get this going. All right. So this year during the budget, obviously we were just starting to work on the renovation or on the budget at the time of the shutdown. So it really reflects the fact that we knew going into the development of the budget that we had problems related to the pandemic we needed to address. Obviously, we were coming out of the renovation. I mean, the day we shut down is when we had planned to shut down for about 10 days. So we were trying to wrap up the renovation. So that had impacted our budget for this year and last year. And then we were forecasting for another year. And then really keeping in mind that the economic forecast moving forward is not great and is not going to rebound quickly. So we had to keep all of that in mind in developing and putting the budget together. I did want to report a little bit on our usage. I thought that would be of interest to you. This chart will show you how we opened, what we started with from a number standpoint, and where we are to date. I had shared this with Sean and David Gibson, the city manager, about a month ago. And so you can see we've had slow, steady growth in usage. When we first opened the first week of July, we were averaging 213 members a day. The week of August 10th, we were up to 311. This past week, we were at 332. So each week, we really have seen an increase. It's not significant. It's not back to where we were, but at least we're growing and people are not leaving us. They are coming. Our weekend hours are a little bit shorter, so that average is less than 200, but we were actually 208 this past weekend. So we're really tracking usage. And as I had shared with the commission about a month ago, we really feel like the slow, steady, measured progress is great because that's showing us people are comfortable working out. We're able to add things in and get more people back. The bad news is we have lost a significant number of members. We were about 7,200 members in February this year. July 1st, which is when we officially reopened, we were at 5,800 members. We are now, as of August 1st, at 5,000. So we are continuing to lose some of our memberships, but that's still pretty strong. So we're trying to do everything we can to keep those people comfortable. This is that new weight room for the district, and I'm sorry to say that you haven't all been in to see it already, but the schools are athletic teams and coaches are using it. I believe that it has been very well received. We're continuing to do some little improvements there, but it's exciting to have them in there and have their own space. We felt that we really worked closely with the district, and Steve Hudson's been doing a great job of keeping us informed of the athletics and the activities that are coming back. We've coordinated both his plan, which he's really working with a group of people that are advising the county, and then the county is also setting the guidelines. So we're all working together, but it's great to see them back. As Caitlin said earlier, it's nice to see the kids be able to swim and play tennis and run cross country. So we're excited about that. As far as programs and rentals and all the other usage of the center, we really have gone very slowly into that part. And we've really done a measured and very slow resumption of services. We are doing personal training and private swim lessons. Those seem to be going okay. People are comfortable with the one-on-one type situation. We've done very limited rentals, but some of our regular users are back. We're starting to see a little increase in people calling about renting. In putting the budget together, we varied our reductions in revenue from anywhere from 25 to 50%. We really looked at the activity of our members in the first 6 weeks and kind of extrapolated that through the end of the budget. Some of the membership categories are pretty strong and some have seen a lot more drop off. So we've seen a lot of seniors drop their memberships. So there's a variety of percentage reductions that you'll see on revenue. We have 2 full-time positions that we are holding open. The one that is a city position will be held open all year. It was not funded in the city's budget, which was a piece of it, and we're not funding in the center's budget. We believe that's okay to do, at least for this year. The district has an open maintenance position, and they're we're not necessarily not going to fill it, but we're not filling it quickly at this point. We have looked for reductions whenever possible. You probably know that we did have to furlough our part-time staff. We did pay them for 5 weeks, and then at that point we furloughed them. Many of them were able to collect unemployment, which was great. They were very happy with how we handled them, and we have about half of our part-time employees back. The rest have, at this point, been technically laid off, but are still eligible for unemployment. We've looked at reducing, shutting down any areas that we can to serve on energy. Tim Wanish and the maintenance staff have been great at really helping us with that. So with all of that, we used all of that to put a budget together. It was challenging because we knew that no matter what we did, we had significant reductions in revenue. But in putting it together for FY20, so that really impacts this year. But as you all know full well, this pandemic has gone way, way longer than anybody anticipated, I think. Well, I think some people did, but we anticipated. So we are projecting that it will last at least another 6 months. So the first 6 months of the budget year will be very difficult. I don't think people are going to rush back indoors at a quick rate, but we do close the gap by being open. We lose more money being closed than we do being open. So we are continuing to open, really focus on maintaining our current membership and trying to figure out how to get some of the other things going while we can. But we have been very vigilant at following the St. Louis County Health Department and the CDC guidelines. So their 25% capacity is still in place. We have really seen reductions expected in other revenue sources because we have not resumed programming. We don't have a lot of the programming revenue coming in. We don't anticipate that it'll resume till 2021. This budget does not anticipate that. We have put a lot of focus on the private instruction and are working on developing some other ways to bring in some revenue from that type of instruction, and maybe some small group early in the year. We have the operating fund includes a contribution from the city and district of $150,000 each. As far as expenses, the main increases are in personnel is really related to pay and benefits. I don't think either you or the other board needs to be schooled on that. Our full-time staff get increases based upon whatever the city and the district do. We have, as you may recall from the last 2 years, we're working on increasing our minimum wages to stay at least a little bit ahead of the state minimums. Those are going up annually, so we do have an increase. All jobs will be paid a minimum of $11 effective October 1, and we'll be at $12 next year. So we really were able to reduce expenditures associated with programming. We do have a large IT expense scheduled this year. Our software replacement, our software program is really not working well. We've had some accounting issues with it, so we are going to look at some other programs and we may replace this year. And the other good thing is Tim and Jim have done an excellent job with utilities. They've held really steady, and some of our energy conservation has really helped. So all of the stuff that was included in the construction has helped with that. So this is just a one-page summary of all the different areas. You can see that we had a significant reduction in revenue. We had estimated we had budgeted 3.27 million. We are looking at about 1.87 will be our end result for this year, and proposing 2.5 for next year. You can see across the board reductions in all revenue sources, except for contributions from parent organizations. And then down at the bottom, but really a significant reduction in our revenue of about 700,000 next year and nearly 1.4 million this year. So we've tried to offset that with reductions in expenditures. You can see that this year much more challenging because that's very hard to move those once you're that far into the year. Next year we have identified reductions. most of where you see it like a 57% in sports and a 13% in fitness, that's because of programming reduction. So you're going to see that up above that the revenue is not there. So we're projecting that this will be our end result for revenue and operating expenses. And then our second fund is the equipment replacement. Please stop me if you have any questions, but the equipment replacement fund, we do have a small replacement money in there for FY21, 36,000. We normally budget between 45 and 50,000 a year. We purchase new equipment, cardio, the treadmills, bikes every year on a plan. This might be something that we could discuss when we start looking at places to hold. We will hold this order until after the first of the year because of all the new equipment that we have. And then we already talked a little bit about the replacement of the recreation software. That'll be about a $50,000 to $70,000 expense. And this is where we put 50,000 from each of the parent organizations. Next year's capital fund is pretty small. We didn't put a ton of money in there. We have a few things hanging out that we're not able to fit into the construction that we're going to try to do, but we really just have money in there for those things that come up. We have UV lights in the pool that cost $6,000 a year to maintain. That goes in the capital budget, things like that. Tony Searing and Jim Brunell, who work with Tim and I, if you don't know who they are, they're our assistants, are beginning to work on a new capital plan. Tim and I feel that they need to start taking some ownership of that and can do that. So we're going to really start working on that in the finance committee, so we have some idea of the next 5 to 10 years, any future capital needs. And we plan to put 100,000 of each contribution in this fund. This slide will show you basically the summary of where we'll end. A piece of good news is that the auditors this year, they just completed our audit last month, and they did find an AR issue, an accounts receivable issue. So we have a little extra money at the end of 2019. That 222,000 actually is money that we thought was gone, and they identified an issue. So that helps us a little bit this year in that we're showing the deficit of $1 million this year, but we will not have to bill both parties for all of that since they've already basically paid some of that. But we are showing a $1 million deficit this year. And then next year we're projecting about 595,000. As I said, we did not project beyond that. We did not do multiple, 2022 and 2023. I think there is just so much unknown that would have been just an exercise and probably would not have accomplished much. I think that we feel like this fall we need to, I'm sure the district is similar to the city in that we need a lot of focus to be on how do we come out of this. And we have 3 committees at the center: the finance committee, the operations committee, and the program committee. And all of them really need to start talking about how do we move forward if we do not rebound from a membership standpoint, because I think that $600,000 makes me nervous, makes me uncomfortable, quite honestly. So we do talk about cost recovery usually every year, and you can see that we've had really good cost recovery model for a long time. We've been around between 90 and 100% cost recovery for the operating fund, and all funds somewhere in that range. Those of you that haven't been on the board before, you've always heard us talk about the original agreements estimated the cost recovery of between 82 and 86%. So I feel like we've done well. Unfortunately, this year and next year will not be that way. But I think that the reality is that we have to spend the next 4 to 6 months figuring out how do we get out of this situation, and how do we change it. Are there ways to change our operations to recoup some of this? So that is what I wanted to talk about. I do know that there's probably some questions out there about things that we haven't talked about. So I'm just going to go through these slides real quickly, and then you can ask whatever questions. There are things we have not resumed at this point. The climbing wall has not opened. The kids center has not opened. The yak and group or recreational swim. Some of those programs are very difficult because they're in really confined spaces. And so I doubt probably the Board of Education needs me to talk to you about how difficult it is to bring a lot of children back together. So we are working on a plan to get those services resumed. Our members have really not been too upset about it. I think they're figuring out what to do with their kids right now and enjoying the outdoors. But I do believe we have about another month before we really need to get these things going again. The student activities, as I said earlier, we've really been in close contact with Steve and his staff and all the coaches. They've done a nice job of getting things going back to getting the sports that can go, working with us on our requirements at the center, as opposed to what most high schools are probably, they can just do whatever they want inside their building. So the teams are there. I know that physical education probably won't come back until they're in school. And we have had discussions about the 7th grade memberships. And right now we need to have some further discussion about that. There's been some thought that until the kids are back in school, we wouldn't necessarily want to do that because they shouldn't be coming during the day, but that we may want to delay that and give 7th and 8th graders a membership next year. So that will be something that I will discuss with the finance and operating and CRSWC, and I think you should talk about that. No matter what, they're not going to get the same experience if they all get a free membership this year. So we could do it so that next year it's intended for both groups, something to consider. And then all our programs and leagues, that is really challenging. It's very hard to do those. We are not planning to run our basketball league. Certainly, if things change with the health conditions and the pandemic, we can do that quickly. But right now, it just would be very difficult to run these types of programs in the current environment. Oasis has informed us they will not be back until after the 1st of the year. They're doing everything remotely. People come in and check things, but they are not here. The Community Foundation is really not going to do any big opening of their history area until after the 1st of the year. Subway is still waiting for the health department to give them their certificate to be able to open. We are hoping to get them open in the next 2 to 4 weeks. They're ready and we're ready. So hopefully that will resume soon. And then all the variety of other people who want to rent space and do things with lots of people, we're hoping to get them back in as soon as we can. But right now we're not bringing that type of activity into the building. So that's kind of it for me on my presentation. And then Mary Jo, should I go through the action item or do you do that?
Yeah, we will do that afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that after, Patty. So yeah, thank you, Patty. So I am just going to go and maybe, maybe stop sharing your screen so we can see everything.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
But you know what, I'm just for the kind of the sake of all voices, I'm just going to ask each board member if you have any questions, and I'm just looking across my screen. So Kim, you happen to be the first person. So do you have any questions for Patty?
No, I'm just one, Patty. So you mentioned briefly that there was a timing on the accounts receivables on the AR. So is that just a one-time accounting adjustment, or is there something more significant that needs to happen with process so we don't see that in the future?
It is related to the problem we're having with our recreation software. And okay. it is a one-time fix for this specific problem, but is the reason that we're looking to change software.
Got it.
Because Thanks. We've had some recurring issues. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Jason, how about you? Do you have any questions for Patty?
Yeah, just one. So we're losing 500,000. How much we losing again this year? I didn't write it down.
$1 million.
$1 million. So does it cost more to operate it, or does it cost less, or does it cost less to just shut it down?
So it's not a simple answer to that, because it depends on if you close it down and lay off all the staff. The delta right now, when we're open, we're losing about $3,000 a day. When we're closed, we're losing about $6,000 a day. So it's more effective to be open. We are closing the gap, and we close the gap a little bit more each time we have more people. If we were to shut down and lay off all the full-time staff and shutter the building, of course that would change, but that's not really what we've been talking about yet, or at this point.
I just wanted to know. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah. So that, and one of the things, and I really appreciate this, both Sean and David with the city said, we need to run it for a while to figure that out. I think Sean may disagree, but I felt like after about 2 or 3 weeks, I thought, oh my God, we just need to shut down. This isn't worth it. And we're just continuing to lose money. I don't know what I thought, that we'd magically open and close the gap and everything be great. I do think that, but I do want that. But after, I think, Sean, it might have been 3 to 4 weeks in that we met, and I was like, maybe we need to change hours. And their focus was, let's try to let it run for, really, we've only been open about 8 weeks now. Let's see if we can get more and close that gap. And that's what we're looking to, is to close that gap of that $3,000. So I think that's our goal at this point, but a good way to look at it, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Amy, do you have any questions?
Hi, Patty.
Hi, Amy.
I just want to thank you for the presentation. I really, I know you guys have had a rough time over there, and you guys have been you and your team have been very, very thoughtful about how to go about things in such a difficult time. And I appreciate your efforts, especially in trying to mitigate some of the financial impact of what I know you've had to make some really hard decisions. One quick question: the tenants, are they paying rent?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the way Subway's lease is written, they don't pay if they're not bringing in money. So they are not, but Oasis is, and the Community Foundation is. Yeah.
Got it. Terrific. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Amy. Gary, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thanks, Patty, for walking us through it, and thanks for trying to close the gap and deal with this as best as we can. I don't have any questions.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. David, how about you? Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. And I'm not sure if Mary Jo or Patty's best to answer. I think we are going to do a budget adjustment, if I'm not mistaken, for this plan year, for this $500,000 hit. But is there any way we can start accruing for the anticipated loss in calendar year 21? Or is that something we will do as an ad hoc adjustment again next year?
We'll probably include that in the actual budget document next year moving forward, because that would be a one known cost. I didn't include a lot of this in this year so that it would be more transparent to the board on what was coming forward, and not some of it being buried and some of it added afterwards. So I was trying to do it more open this year.
Yeah, no, and I know we talked about it. I agree with the approach. It's, I was just curious so we can just start accruing for it. So
David,
cool.
explain for us non-financial people what you mean when you say that.
I guess the easiest way to say it is, in our world, we take that big expense hit. Mary Jo, what is it, July, when we write all those checks? And I'm just wondering if we start to build up the budget for it in advance so that it's on the forecast. We know it's there. It's not an ad hoc item that's going to whack us, mid-year next year. I guess I may not be explaining that the best way. I think in balance sheet terms, but the long and short is just that we're budgeting for it as opposed to treating it as a one-off.
Yeah, we'd definitely be budgeting for it. And also, you know, in the sense of kind of accruing, actually paying it or something, you know, the center and both entities, the city and the district, have always had the agreement that we weren't going to have the center hold a lot of our funding, that, you know, they would get what they would need and keep a minimal fund balance. And Patty, I don't remember the exact amount, but we didn't want the fund balance at the center of the CRSWC to build too much where they were holding both of the entities' funds. And so it's just something that we know we'll budget for it and then we'll build off of that. And so, you know, I don't remember what the fund balance is normally.
I think we had said 200,000.
That's what I was thinking.
But it was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's minimal.
10 years ago, and that was
Right.
about what we were keeping in there. So
Yeah. And I think it was at the time, it was during the recession when both the district and the city were very minimal revenue streams. And we were like, we can't give you our money to hold, we have to hold it ourselves.
yeah.
So just a follow-up question based on that. So if you're not holding a fund balance with such a shortfall between revenues and expenses, are you concerned about the timing of payments this year for employees or anything like that?
Well, no, because the way the agreements are written, so the city pays all the bills, and for a large portion of it, the district pays all the maintenance department bills, and then we bill each other.
Okay.
And so I think we're fine because we're not expected to pay the bills. The city and district are paying them.
Got it. Thank you.
I think if we were an individual organization that you were supporting, we'd probably have a whole different conversation. I think, Mary Jo, I think that's why we ended up that way. There was discussion probably, I think it was like 2009, 10, of maybe we need to start building up the fund balance, and this district and city should give the center $250,000 a year, and then they'd have this fund balance for capital. And then I think that's when everybody was like, wait a minute, we're not going to give them our money to hold. It's our money, so. And then I think, Mary Jo, you've been putting money aside too, so.
Yeah, I've had a separate fund for capital expenditures set aside. Yeah. That we did use some this year for the parking lot and for that equipment. You saw that great picture of that. That was beautiful.
Caitlin, do you have any questions? I know you blipped out and came back, so.
Yeah, I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. And Stacy, do you have any questions?
I don't. Thanks, Patty.
Thanks, Stacy.
And I really don't have any questions either, just to compliment Patty, you and Tim and the whole staff and continuing to really make it a going concern. It's really difficult. And I know there are some facilities who, even to Jason's earlier question, who just decided that the math was better to shut down.
Yeah.
And so to your credit, you're, working the math to not shut down and make it better. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
So we are then going to move on to our action item that is kind of associated with this. And this is a 5.01. It's the Clayton Recreation, Sports and Wellness Committee, or the CRSWC, budget approval. And again, so do we have a motion for that, Gary?
Yes, I move that the Board of Education approve the fiscal year 2021 CRSWC budget as submitted.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. And thanks, Patty. We really, again, appreciate it and understand that you might want to enjoy the rest of your night.
Okay.
You really don't have
Thank
to.
you. Who knows what I'll learn? I might learn something next.
You could. You could.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So we're moving on to 6.01, which is actually an information item, and that's the COVID-related impact update, which is really around budget. So Mary Jo.
Okay, let me see if I can share Screen, I haven't done this before. All right. Okay, so I wanted to provide the board with a brief update based on what is currently known as of today. So I'm stressing that a lot. So please keep in mind that things are literally changing daily. So for example, just yesterday, one of the items that I have listed in here, we received a notification from the state of Missouri that 50% of our unemployment claims would now be refunded. And that was one of our substantial costs that I included on the slide. So now we're estimating $40,000 will now get refunded back to us. And so applying this new information to the analysis I just presented, it shows that we actually have more organic savings than we had cost. So I know this will not be the overall financial result at the end of the year. And that's where I'm saying that things are literally changing daily. So as the district progresses with returning students into the classroom, I am anticipating there'll be other necessary expenses, perhaps such as more instructional support, such as interns, the need for additional long-term substitutes to assist with perhaps supervision of students or coverage of staff absences due to COVID. Further, we know we're going to require additional custodial support. Depending on how we bring the students back, we're going to shift some of the support, but once we get all the students back in the building, or at least in a hybrid model, we don't have enough daytime staff in order to clean and disinfect touch points and restrooms the way that we need to. There also might be other supplies or technological supports that are required, but we won't know until we're actually in the classroom. So, and then, as Patty mentioned, she's estimating next year's loss of that $595,000. But, as the year goes on and she gets more information, we'll continue to monitor that, but that amount might even change. And so everything as we receive, I'm trying to provide updates to the board, and we'll determine the best way to move it forward. But part of the reason I wanted to do a presentation tonight is because we are asking for budget revisions. As I mentioned with David, I'm trying to do these transparent so that everybody knows what's going on and it's not all buried into a document and we're not really positive. So I just want to make sure everyone knows what's going on and it's been transparent. So the summary I made, as I mentioned during the budget presentation in June, we were anticipating some savings to be achieved organically and due to these restrictions. And so as you can see, there is currently approximately $60,000 worth of reduced overtime expenses for hourly staff. And most of that is due to overtime in the summer for maintenance. Because of the heavy use of our buildings in the summer for summer programs, we end up doing a lot of condensed overtime in order to get summer projects done for all the staff's facility improvements that we can get done in the 2-week time frame that we get. Plus other times on the weekends, we end up doing a lot of weekend work and stuff like that. So due to that stay-at-home mandate and not having the summer programs in all of our buildings, maintenance projects got completed during the normal workday with no overtime. I will say Tim and Jim were extremely happy with the summer being able to get so much work done. The other items is substitutes. Were through September 30th, we're estimating approximately $60,000 of reduced substitute costs due to all of this remote learning. We're not hiring substitutes during this time frame. Administration also reviewed part-time temporary employment contracts where staff would not be able to perform the necessary duties related to the PTTEs. And then we did inform those impacted staff that that PTT would not be paid. I am thinking that possibly some of them may be reinstated as students return to the campus, but then they would be adjusted to a lesser amount. But right now, that is the total amount that we have that we've at least put on hold. Transportation, the district rents a substantial amount of buses to transport students for field trips and athletic events. And we do have 3 of our own buses, but just like a grade level trip requires use of 6 buses, like say at Wydown, in an elementary is like 5 buses. And we have to rent those because we can't have all of our buses out at one time. So we do in athletic events, we're constantly renting buses for athletic events. So currently through September 30th, we're estimating a savings of $40,000 there for the rentals and the gasoline and maintenance of our current buses. As I also mentioned, we didn't run a full summer program. This is not related to Summer Quest at all. That's a break-even program. So we neither had expenses or revenue related to that. This is strictly the summer school programs, which normally we budget around $250,000 of expenses to that. Most of our students participate in the Springfield Launch online program, and they actually enrolled as students of Springfield, Missouri, and therefore we didn't have to pay anything for that. So we did run the elementary and the Y down, and then we did have a few teachers at the high school running. So we ended up spending around $187,000 on that program instead of the $250,000. And then with professional development, since staff can't travel right now, we're restricting all travel. We want staff teaching students and focusing on the instruction. We've had and summer is actually our heaviest time for staff travel. We've had $44,000 of savings this year on that. And then finally with utilities, as Patty mentioned, we too have seen a lot of energy savings, not having, 350 students in the high school for 6 weeks in the summer has caused a lot of savings in utilities. And so that's been estimated through September 30th to be around $73,000. So the other category I have titled as costs, but a few of them are actually more due to loss of revenue. So as I go through, I'll explain those areas. So the first one with Family Center, we have not furloughed any Family Center staff. So those staff are still working with students. We decided to present a reduced tuition amount to families, and we did have many families take that. It basically provides them some services and holds their spot in line for when we do come back. If you did not pay the 30% reduced fee, you lost your spot. So it was a little enticement. So this $150,000 represents the estimated loss of revenue through September 30th on that program. On the Kid Zone, we did furlough all of our part-time Kid Zone workers, and we are also not receiving any revenue for this program. This program does generate revenue for the district, and therefore there is a loss of revenue on it. And then there's also, we did maintain the 2 full-time staff site directors. So that $33,000 not only represents the loss of the revenue, but then the expenses for those 2 staff. Regarding technology costs, that's really representing our online and digital learning resources that we needed to purchase in order to be fully remote and teach in a different manner than we did in the spring. That's not, I don't think there's any equipment in that number at all. Regarding the PPE and cleaning, we've been purchasing plexiglass dividers for support staff workstations, teachers' desks, students' desks, social distancing signage, face masks for staff and students, because we do plan to have all students wear them. Again, just continuing with disinfectants and other cleaning supplies. So we had spent about 60-some thousand last year. We've already spent another 50,000 this year. And that's just through September. The virtual instruction represents the expense related to students who have selected Learn from Home because we're using a different platform from them. So that's associated with that learning experience. The $60,000, as I mentioned, for the unemployment expenses. If you're familiar with unemployment claims, as I mentioned, we've only furloughed 1 set of staff, and it's just been recently in the last month. But the way they calculate it, the district doesn't pay an insurance, we pay actual claims. And so there's a base period with unemployment claims, and it's the first 4 of the last 5 quarters. So they do a look back. So even though we might not have been the ones that laid them off, if we had salaries for them, we're going to pay a portion of that base period. So coaches and subs or any teacher that's worked here in the last year and a half, about a year and a half, would be eligible for unemployment that we would be paying for. So we do dispute any claims that we don't feel is real. There have been a lot of fraudulent claims, and we've been monitoring for that. But we typically budget around $20,000 a year for unemployment. We're estimating 80,000. So that's 60,000 is the amount above that. But we're hoping, based on the letter we got yesterday, that we should get back about $40,000 of that 60,000 additional cost. So, and then finally, food service. This program too has an offsetting revenue to it. So like Kid Zone, it represents both the loss of revenue and the expenses right now, we only are maintaining the current director of the program. They hire their own staff and furlough their own staff, so that's not running through the district. So, so as you can see, if we apply that $40,000 to offset that cost, it reduces the cost down to $466,000. But yet we've had organic savings of $477,000. So administration is going to continue to look for savings whenever possible to offset future costs. But I do anticipate by the end of the school year, we will have expenses that do outweigh our savings. So there are also some current extraordinary items I wanted to discuss. And in regards to revenue, we talked about the CARES funding from the state of Missouri from that we were notified last year. We thought we were going to receive it last year. Unfortunately, it's going to come through this year. Well, unfortunately or unfortunately, either way, we're going to get it, but it'll be in this year's budget. We also received Title IV funding that covered the cost of hotspots that we purchased for students in need. So all of those costs were covered by a grant. And we're also set to receive additional hotspots from the county. We just completed all of that necessary paperwork to secure those devices. And we are applying for any type of funding that we can to offset expenses. We've applied for some grants through the county for kid zone losses. And we've also, as I mentioned in my summary for one of the expenses on that needlepoint bipolar ionization system, there's funding for potential capital projects that improve air quality. So in regards to expenses, as Patty presented, the district will need to pay our portion of the operating deficit. So I do have a budget request for tonight that I'm asking that you guys approve so that we can increase the budget. And we don't normally ever do this. So that's why I'm trying to do these presentations. Last year was the first time in the 11 years that I've been basically in this position that we asked for a budget increase, and that was for Adzik Field. So this is only the second one. So this is very rare. And the reason we do this is because if we exceed the budget, that's a state finding. It'll be written up in the audit. So we have to ensure that our budget is always in excess of what we spend. And $500,000 is a large amount for one fund. And so we want to make sure that we don't exceed our budget request. So, and then the second expense is called a needlepoint bipolar ionization system. And as that executive summary that I wrote for that request, it'll provide pathogen removal remediation, which is integrated into each building's HVAC system. This total project cost is estimated at approximately $500,000 because we have, most of our buildings have been expanded on throughout the years. And each time we add on to the building, that's another air conditioning unit. So because we have so many, like Captain actually has the same number of air conditioning units as Whitehound, but since Whitehound's new, they have less, even though the building's probably, a third of the size larger than Captain. So once all these final bids are received, we'll put in an official budget request for that and ask for the approval. I did not ask for that budget request right now because we're only working off of an estimate. But I did want to be able to provide all of this in a presentation. So as those things move forward, you at least have some background on it. And as we get any other requests, we'll move forward with those as well. So I'm presenting the fund balance projections with all these estimated costs and savings included. And I will also update this once we get information to set the tax levy at the end of the month. So this might look a little different at the end of the month once we get all of the assessed value information and all the necessary information to set the tax levy. I do anticipate that we will still be able to roll back the levy. Because of the successful passing of Prop E, we're just in a much better secure financial position to cover all of these extraordinary expenses. And I'm just asking for the board's support as these requests are brought forward for approval. So as administration will just continue to ensure a learning environment that's as safe as possible, both physically and emotionally for our students and staff. We'll look for every potential area of savings that we can find, and we'll consider to pursue any federal, state, or county funding opportunities that we can. I just want to give the board some assurance that we will continue to work on all those things. So does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Mary Jo. So I'm just going to go through again, and maybe I'll go in reverse order. So Stacy, do you have any questions?
Just a quick one, and I'm sorry if I missed this. The ionization system, is that something that we're getting bids on? Is that that's an estimate you said, right? Okay.
Right, so it was presented because it wasn't budgeted.
Right.
So the policy states that if it's over $50,000 and was not budgeted, we have to ask for approval just to go out for bid.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Caitlin, do you have any questions?
No questions for me.
Thank you. David, how about you? Do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Gary, do you have any questions?
So just clarifying where I think we are, you're you're giving us the background for both of these extraordinary expenses. And then we are going to come back and do action items specifically approving the center, the revision of the center, of the budget for the center, and then also just approve getting bids. But we'll come back to approve any contracts on the ionization system.
Right, and the budget revision at the same time so that the budget matches the request.
So we'll do another budget revision then for that. But
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Amy, do you have any questions?
I do. It's just a kind of a clarifying question building on Stacy's question, I think. So that ionization, you mentioned pathogen. So is that one of those like air filtration systems for COVID?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a filtration system, but yeah, it's kind of the same. It actually adjusts the molecules in the air, it changes them.
Got it. Okay. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
It does
Thank you.
it improves the filtration because it can actually kill some of the molecules before it even gets to the filters, but yes.
So are we working with any consultant to figure out which is the best system for that? I have no idea. I just know there's all different types of systems and.
Yeah, and that summary we did put in there why we felt this one was the best because it has like the least amount of side effects, and it's not just like UV lighting is more of just a surface cleaner, and this is more of a total air cleaner. So, and it's
Perfect.
better than just filters. So
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Jason, any questions?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Kim, do you have any questions? Okay. All right, great. Thank you. And I don't have any questions. Mary Jo, thanks for putting it together. I think it's very helpful for us to, I understand it's a snapshot, but it's helpful for us to see kind of, cost savings and additional costs. So thank you. Okay, so we are going to move to the next item, which is 7.01, which is the strategic plan / data dashboard. And Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sorry. I apologize. I'm trying to get this set up. I apologize. Right there. It's shut down on me. I'm trying to get it back up. I apologize for that. Let's see.
Sean, would it be helpful if we take a 2 or 3 minute bio break?
I think I'm almost there. I
Okay.
don't know what. Let's see if this works. Okay, can you see that all right? Let's see if it's loading. All right. So thanks for your patience on that. And so as Joe said, we are going to spend some time working on our strategic plan. And this is really an exciting time for us because there's a confluence of a lot of work coming together for what we're going to be doing tonight and presenting to the board. And I want us to remember that when we're thinking about who we are as a district, a hallmark of our district has been our excellence. And as I've said to you in the past, is that we have to make sure that we're looking deeper than some of those things that we use to measure our success. We have to really start defining how do we want to measure success and thinking about how we approach teaching and learning in a transformational way. So instead of it just being complacent and saying, you know what, we're already doing great things, we have to push ourselves to think differently about what we do for our students so that students, no matter who they are, no matter their race, no matter their zip code, no matter their ability, they are going to be successful in our district. When we think about our strategic plan, oftentimes when you think about what a traditional strategic plan looks like, you'll see that there will be measures within that are measuring academic performance, and you'll see that we'll have measures connected to quality of teachers and also fiscal responsibility. And when we approached the strategic plan, we thought about it like, what are those givens that are going to be the absolute essentials that we are going to be measuring no matter what we're doing? And then what are the goals? What are those ways we can be different? Or what are those ways that we can be aspirational or bold or transformational in our approach? So when you look at the plan that we presented, we are going to have, our dashboard is going to have some different measures that might be different than what we've measured in the past. But I want to assure the board that we will continue to make sure that our academic performance is still being measured. We'll make sure that we still have high quality teachers, and we'll make sure that we dedicating time to make sure that we are being fiscally responsive. So at this point, in history in Clayton, we're at this pivotal point where we're launching a new strategic plan. We have a dedicated focus to equity and anti-bias and anti-racism work. And then we also have, even though that Mary Jo just shared with you some of those things that are challenges for us, our community has come together to support us and helped us be fiscally healthy by the passing of Prop E. And the confluence of all those coming together really helps us decide what we want to do for the future of our students. And when we're thinking about our strategic plan, we are asking ourselves that question, what future are we trying to create for our students? And when we started this whole process 2 years ago, we started with the end in mind and developing the profile of the graduate. And that profile was developed through an engagement of stakeholders, through community members. Also, we had parents, students. We actually had our former student board representative help facilitate some of those meetings. And we came up with our profile of the graduate. And I will say that probably more than any of the work that we've done, it has been incredible to see how the profile has already influenced some of the work within our classrooms, our curriculum development, and really trying to make sure that we are looking beyond just what we would, the typical of measuring the academic performances. We're trying to measure what is going to be good for creating putting in place good human beings. And I would say that some people might look at the skills that are on this profile of the graduate and use the term soft skills. And I would say that we need to stop using that term, because these are the skills that are going to be absolutely essential for our students to be successful in school and when they leave the district. So they're absolutely essential, and they are the grounding for all of our work in the strategic plan. Now, our strategic plan is going to be the roadmap that we use to guide our work. So this strategic plan is put in place for us to say, what are we going to be doing for the next 3 years? It's also going to be important that we know what we're going to measure. So what we're measuring matters. And so we know that it's going to be important for us to keep coming back to the strategic plan and what we're measuring to determine whether or not we need to adjust. And that adjustment is that evergreen model. Just because we present something to you today doesn't mean that some things might not change later based off the data that we're looking at. And then we're also making sure that we're being learner-centered. And when we talk about learners, it's not just about the students, it's about the educators, it's also about the parents and the administrators and the community members. Now, when we talk about our story did start 2 years ago when we started the profile, and we collected a lot of data, we collected a lot of input, we researched what other school districts were doing. And then we also engaged the community in this past year when we started working on the development of the strategic plan. We engaged the community in a different way using a facilitator called Filament that helped us get some additional input and data that helped us create our goal statements. And those goal statements became our priority. So we have worked to engage, develop, and prioritize these goal statements through this whole process of collecting data. We also wanted to make sure that we wanted to do everything right. And so our hope was that we would be able to present this in August. And we wanted to make sure we're presenting something that was right. And so we still feel we're doing this in a timely manner, which is important because we just didn't want to rush something and we wanted to make sure we're presenting something that we felt very confident about to the board. When you look at the strategic plan and the document that we provided you, we focused on 2 things for the board. And the 2 things that we focused on were the strategic goals and the objectives. And when we think about our objectives, we know that our objective, when we think about our goals are what are bold and aspirational. This is, what we want down the road for our students. The objectives are what would be true if we were going to be reaching those goals. So I would say that they're more specific. This is where you're going to see the measures, and this is where the board is going to be holding us accountable to the work. So the goals and the objectives. The other aspect of the strategic plan are the action steps and the strategies. And so tonight we are really, and that is really the responsibility of the administration, and those are the responsibility of our different teachers and curriculum coordinators and other positions that are within our district to help put those action steps into place and to actually follow through with those. Once our action steps are moving forward, then we're going to see progress with our objectives, and that's ultimately going to help us reach our goals. I would say that, so one of the things you'll see in the document tonight is part of our conversation is about just those strategic goals and those objectives, but the other aspect is the measures of success. And so we have provided with you a dashboard that would allow us to make sure that we're coming back and constantly looking at what is our progress and how do we know that, and how do we know whether or not we're making progress and whether or not we need to make some adjustments. So based off all of the work that we've done over the last 2 years, our district strategic goals are the following. We'll ensure learners of all identities feel safe and valued. We will commit to the educational growth of our learners through an equitable, personalized, individual learning experience. And we'll be dedicated to the personal growth of learners and their social, emotional, and physical well-being. Now you would see like, okay, those are pretty big, lofty goals, but that's what they're meant to be. They're supposed to be bold and thinking about being aspirational. When we come down to the objectives, as I said earlier, this is what would be true. This is what we're working towards. They're clear, they're measurable, and then following those would be the action steps. These are the ways that we're going to reach our objectives, and our resources are connected to those action steps. So similar to what, when we're thinking about, we can't just say that we're going to enact an action step, but not also think about what is the capital that we're going to be using to make this happen? What money do we need to dedicate to this? What adjustments do we need to make to our budget to make sure that they are being supported? And then the other thing too is that these action steps would be fluid. So if we're not seeing that there's progress towards our objectives, this is where we as the board or the administration can make recommendations to say, this isn't working and we haven't seen the progress and we have to make some adjustments. The one aspect that you'll see, that you won't see in the document that we shared with you, but we'll share at the end of the week, is that we have already started developing all the action steps that are connected to the objectives and the goals. And I wanted just to show you an example that we are developing action steps that are measurable, that we can monitor their progress. And then we're also assigning oversight leaders who are going to be responsible. And what I'm going to do is connect the goals of our central office administrators to the aspects of the strategic plan. And similar to what you will do for me in terms of holding me accountable to these goals, I will also be doing that with our central office staff. The other thing that's important to know is that we have developed a dashboard that is going to be a way for us to measure our progress over a period of time. And we've looked at 3 years for the strategic plan. And we definitely are going to go beyond that, but we want to make sure that we're making progress in each one of those areas that we have designated. And these measures of success are going to, they might change along the way. So the dashboard we provided for you doesn't have all the data in it yet. One, because some of it we don't have the baseline data, and two, we are actually creating the measures and looking at ways that we are going to measure our success. So that's going to be part of the process. I wanted you to get an idea about what this would look like. And so we have, this top part is going to be an interactive part of our website that people can go to be able to see the data very transparently. But then we also have something that's a little bit more looking like a spreadsheet that the board will be able to monitor as we keep coming back to the board meetings. And you'll see that we will monitor progress as we go along throughout the year. There will be benchmarks that will be in between here. So that way we can constantly say whether or not we're moving towards those goals. So I wanted you to see that this is going to be graphically on our website, but it's also going to be something that's very pragmatic and easy to see through a spreadsheet. The Board of Education just recently passed the anti-bias and anti-racism board resolution. And as you can see through the document, we've wanted to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to the information that was in that resolution. And so we not only looked at every action step and every objective, but we wanted to make sure that we crosswalked it with the resolution so we weren't missing anything. And it was also going to be a way for us to hold ourselves accountable to that work, which is so integral to being a successful district. So tonight, what we're going to do is, this is going to be a collaboration between the central office administrators and the board members. And what you're going to do is have some time to process. And so we have provided the 2 documents, which are the strategic planning document and the dashboard, and those are in board docs. And what we'd like you to do is take about 5 to 10 minutes just to look at the documents and just to be able to process through them, look through them to see, so that way you're familiar with them. And then what you're going to do is spend about 15 to 20 minutes working with central office administrators and one another in 4 different groups. And then we're going to be asking you some probing questions that the central office administrators are going to take notes on. And we want to make sure that the board and the central office administrators have time to look at these documents with one another. And that first probing question is, does this plan represent the direction we want to go? And what we've been talking about over the last 2 years. And what makes you say that? What are those specifics in the plan? You may say something like, I'm not seeing this. And the reason I say that is because I'm not seeing, we've talked about this, but I'm not noticing it. We also want to take note on that. The other thing that we want is that this plan is going to be brought back to the board for approval. And so the question we also want you to consider is what questions need to be answered before the board votes to approve. And so our central office administrators are going to be taking notes, and they're going to be participating in this conversation and try to answer questions as much as possible. But what we want to gather is those questions that we still think that need to be addressed before the board approves. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is not go into the document and start wordsmithing and looking at changing things. We want to look at it at the 10,000 foot level and really ask ourselves, it's like, okay, does this represent where we need to go as a district? And then what still needs to be answered in order for us to move forward with a vote? And so we're going to break you into smaller groups and allow you to have about 15 to 20 minutes to focus on that. And then what we're going to do is ask our central office administrators when we come back to give or you can bring someone who, our board member, you can choose to provide a tweet for maybe something that represents the conversation that you had. And when we say a tweet, it's like a succinct statement that's that has a lot of information, but not a lot of words. So, so I want to stop there and see if you had any questions before we break into our small groups.
Anybody have any questions about what we're going to do next?
Okay. So the next step is that Chris is going to, and Chris Tennant is going to help us with this, and I'm going to stop sharing. I sent the questions to the central office administrators so they can repeat those questions to you. And then the central office administrators will be taking notes as you're talking. For those of you in public who are viewing this, we are going to have a little block of time when the board is going to be working. And we will be coming back in about, we'll say about 15, 20 minutes. And I will send out a notice at 15 minutes and check to see how much time you need. Okay. Chris, would you be able to then break us into smaller groups?
Yeah, I just sent everybody their breakout group invitations. All right, so we should have everybody in their breakout rooms right now.
Okay, it looks like everyone is back. Hopefully you had a productive time in your breakout groups. So what we're going to do now is just take a few, take some time, take a few minutes to go around to each group. And I asked you to think about like, what would be, if you had to write a tweet to represent maybe something that's out of your conversation that you think would be good for the whole group to hear, it'd be, this would be the opportunity to do that. And so I was going to see if we could start with Gary, Kim, and Milena to see if you could do your tweet and see if we have any questions that go along with that.
Sure. So our tweet was that we haven't stopped focusing on what makes us who we are and what already makes us great. I don't know if you want me to explain a little bit about it. I'm not sure it stands on its own. But what we were talking about was that from a standpoint of maybe what you were talking about with the givens and the goals, that what's a way for us to be able to capture the givens within the document so that that's not lost. And so we came up with some ideas of ways to capture that on the front end of the document to then be able to focus big picture on the goals.
Okay, that's helpful. And that could be something that we could easily incorporate. Thank you. How about Amy, David, Cameron, and Chris?
So we had some good discussion. I guess, you know, a good tweet would be, you know, great potential on the road to success, but great potential on the road to success, but we need to be able to account for bumps in the road and detours that we may encounter. So pretty much explaining that, you know, there was strong confidence in all of our goals, you know, from a broad standpoint. I think once we got into the objectives, you know, we had some questions on exactly, you know, not only if our measurements were going to give us the data that we need, but kind of what is the individualized plan and what does the practice look like, I guess, on a daily basis and from a yearly plan standpoint. From each goal. So there were some objectives that had some of those questions, but, you know, in terms of capturing everything that we needed to capture, you know, the goals and objectives did a good job of that, but really just once we get into the nitty gritty details, what does that look like in terms of, you know, everyday implementation?
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. How about Stacy, Jason, Tony, and Mary Jo?
So our tweet was Clayton's fluid strategic plan aligns with the attributes of profile of a graduate and ABAR focused on action, results, and accountability, #outcomes. We thought that kind of represented the work because we thought what came out was that we really felt that the plan aligns well with the attributes of profile of a graduate, and the ABAR work is clearly lined out throughout the document. So it was very purposeful and really just seeing how everything sort of comes together in this one document. The questions that we had that came up in the group were just around accountability and measurement. How are all these things going to be measurable? And with that being said, really complementing the idea of the dashboard and having that great visual tool for the public to see the progress at any given time would be great. But some of the things being a little complicated, especially as they apply to ABAR and SEL, as they are based on, a lot of these are based on assumptions and being subjective. So how do we go about measuring some of those? And then the other big question that we had that came up in the group was, how do we go about approving a plan without seeing what the action steps are for implementation?
Okay, thank you. And we will make sure that the board gets to see the entire plan too, with the action steps as well. And then the last one would be Joe, Robin, and Jeff, and Caitlin.
So I can share. So our tweet was still areas for growth and focus on mental health and empowering students of color through a diverse curriculum. but the strongest plan we've ever had, helping prepare students for a diverse world. That might be more characters than we were allowed. But we also started our own hashtag, which was SDCSP20-23, if you want to follow that. The reason that we focused on that for our tweet was that we had some good conversations about and a lot of good support, I think, overall for the goals and objectives that are part of this, but also some areas that we could maybe be more specific about. And so some areas specifically about mental health and about addressing racism and through empowerment and communities of color instead of in a deficit viewpoint, more of a empowerment point of view. So we talked quite a bit about that, and then we also really spent some time thinking about the measures. And so I think that was one of the pieces that would have been a question that came up about the measures, just making sure that we're providing context for our community when they are reviewing those the numbers and the metrics that we're providing, that we're not just throwing numbers, we're actually providing context for what they might mean. That was something that came up for the group as being important. But again, really overall support for the goals, objectives, and the conceptual framework of providing data points. And really being careful too about the kind of looking at the right kind of data points for this, so that we're not just putting a number out there, that we're giving it context and that there's quality over quantity.
Thank you. So all the central office administrators should have collected those questions and that information. And what we're going to do is take that information back and synthesize it and think about how we need to make some refinements before we bring the plan back for improvement. I will say that just from my perspective is that the plan is one that I feel like people can really be invested in. And it's not just that typical type of strategic plan where we have, it's focused solely on just academics and solely just on maybe those types of measures. It's really looking at the human aspect of our students. And I think it's really grounded in our profile of the graduate. So hopefully you will take some additional time and we will add some additional information to the Friday memo so you can see some more of the action steps. But just this part right here helps us think about what refinements, and we want to just make sure that we're going in the right direction. And what I'm hearing is it feeling like we are moving. There might be some refinements in terms of measurements, providing context to our community. And also, just for those community members listening, is that we will be providing this as a transparent document on our website with those measures and the dashboard. So at this point, we'll take that information and bring it back to the board, and appreciate your time working groups.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, everybody. So again, this isn't the last time we're not approving it tonight. This was just to give kind of some preliminary input.
And then, Joe, can I just say one other thing is that I also just want to make sure that we are emphasizing that this work has already started. So, I mean, I know that there might be some refinements, but we're already moving on all the work that's in this plan. And so it's not like we're waiting for this approval. We will get it approved by the board, but we're not holding back and we're moving forward with it.
Yep. Awesome. So speaking of action, we're going to move on to our action items. We have a number of them. So we're going to start with 8.01, which is the Glenridge Children's Center, or GCC, Inc. Termination of a lease agreement and memorandum of understanding. So Gary, do we have a motion?
Yes. So 8.01, I move that the Board of Education approve the termination of lease agreement by and between the School District of Clayton and the Glenridge Children's Center, Inc., effective September 9, 2020, and the separate memorandum of understanding by and between the School District of Clayton and the Glenridge Children's Center, Inc. for a one-year term ending June 30, 2021.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments about this?
I actually have a question about it, Joe. I don't know if you want to
go ahead.
What order you want to take? And is Mary Jo still with us on this, or
she is?
So to risk being a little bit probably slightly annoying about this, I was hoping that you could walk us through a little bit how this is still seems necessary to have both an agreement that terminates our lease with them and also a continuing memorandum of understanding that goes forward. I'm just not following why we need both of those and what the relationship is going to be going forward once we've terminated the lease and we've implemented Kid Zone. It's just not, and again, I'm sorry to be a pest about this, but I'm just not following the process of why we're doing it that way.
And basically, the GCC, their board, I would say I don't think they're not dissolving the entity, and so they wanted to move forward in a manner where I guess they feel they're a partner with the district in how we're moving forward, and the memorandum of understanding defines their role and our role. And if you know, as you read it, you can see, you know, there's not. It does outline, you know, that we're not, you know, required to hire their staff. You know, they have to go through district procedures and stuff like that. You know, we'll cooperate with communications, but in reality, you know, we're going to operate that program just like we do our other programs. And so it just seemed to make their board feel better that we had an agreement together moving forward, and that we will have a discussion about how it moves forward at the end of the 1 year.
And then Gary, just so you know, so I looked at it last week and asked them to split it out into two separate agreements. Right. And I think some of it was a byproduct of their council. So I just wanted you to, that was why last time we ended up we didn't vote on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly does make it, I mean, the termination agreement makes more sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, I don't want to critique other people's work or whatever. I just, it's not clear to me why the district would enter into this memorandum of understanding, to be blunt. Like, I don't see why we would obligate ourselves to an outside entity to do things like provide care and before and after care students for students and families of Glenridge community. We haven't done that with anybody else for the other schools. That just doesn't make sense.
And Sean, I don't know, were you at their meeting where they had the conversation or not? Some of it was just individual conversations, but they had separate board meetings.
Yeah, I was not at their board meeting.
Want some. They haven't dissolved, and so I don't think they're ready to just dissolve the entity. And I think this makes them feel like, you know, as you can see from the memorandum, Gary, they really have no voice or anything to if you read it, there's not a whole lot. They don't have a whole lot in there.
Right. Right. And I mean, just historically, like Sean, like this goes back a bunch of years, and historically, you know, GCC is a very beloved, you know, it was something very unique to Glenridge, and I know that the other schools they had the Kid Zone structure, but it was a very beloved, you know, organization within Glenridge, and there's a lot of history there. So I don't know if that sheds any light on it, but
the way that I would frame it is that, and similar to what Amy said, that this has been like an institution within our district that we have supported in a lot of ways, if you think about it, in terms of providing space for them. And I think that with this agreement, it is very hard to think about dissolving something that's been in place, I think, for multiple decades. And I think that, and so when they were thinking about this, it was almost like they were feeling a little bit better about moving forward with this plan, because it is a big change for the Glenridge community, that after a year, being able to evaluate how things have gone and seeing whether or not they would continue with having Kid Zone at Glenridge. And that's how I'm kind of taking it. But I think that for the most part, they're feeling very confident about the Kid Zone program and feel that this is a really good move. And I personally feel like as the leader of the district, having oversight over the programs and knowing that we have more oversight over the after school programs is a good thing for us. And I feel like it allows for there can be some consistency, and in our schools can work between one another once we get back, that, you know, having programs where they're sharing. So I think it was just kind of almost like a gradual release. And so that's my untechnical way of describing it, but I feel like it's a good step moving forward that we're moving in, having Kids Zone as part of Glen Ridge.
Yeah, and they did actually want it to be a 2-year memorandum of understanding, which I was a little uncomfortable with, and I felt like doing it 1 year with a opportunity to have both entities come together and discuss it, and then it would be the district's decision whether or not we extend this for another year. But so that was another, you know, negotiation back and forth with them that they did agree to. So,
and I think it's important to note that these are parent volunteers who are on this board, and they have been very amenable to any of these conversations, and they have been extremely supportive. And I actually have to commend them for running such an amazing program for so long.
Any other questions or comments?
I don't want to monopolize it, Joe, but like if just one follow-up to that, Sean and Mary Jo, well, it's kind of two-part. I mean, I assume we did have our own attorneys look at this as well. Is that right?
yes.
And I mean, I don't want to at all take away from like the spirit of where this is coming. It's just, as I was having a hard time understanding what the goal for having that memorandum of understanding was, and I didn't want it to be, you know, there to be expectations that they can decide next year that we don't get to have Kids on there again. Like, because I don't think that's really a fair expectation if that's what it is.
No. Yeah, and that's why we tried to make it clear in there that, you know, the district is making all the decisions in that memorandum, and so they really didn't have a whole lot of rights in it. So
thank you. I'm sorry for so many comments.
So just real quick, Gary, that's a good point. So then just real fast, make sure it's clear and simple. So what's the point of it again? What's the point of the memorandum? Like, if they don't have any rights, we control the dice. What's the point of it again?
that we would be moving forward, at least in a partnership to help the community, you know, transition together, so that the district and the GCC community were transitioning together moving forward.
Any other
But that's why, you know, the lease is terminated. They have no, you know, they have no rights to occupy the premises. There's no, you know, anything moving forward is strictly the decision of the board. And so
is there like a way for them to say, I know this was just asked, but if they wanted to say, we don't want you all running Kids Zone out of there, we actually want to do it ourselves. We have a petition, we have whatever. Could that be an obstacle for us?
that would be at the end of the program during the evaluation. We are going to do a survey, you know, to make sure that we're working with the community, the Glen Ridge community, you know, and then everything would be brought forward to the board, you know, for any extension of that MOU or any request to initiate a second lease. So it'd be for the board at the time, at the end of this agreement, to make that decision.
Cool. Any other questions or comments?
And I guess I will make one comment. Just as Sean said, you know, the district values the opportunity to take over that program. And I think, you know, administration from Family Center to Kids Zone, from Sean and myself, you know, we all think this is the best way to move forward. So.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. So we're moving on to 8.02, which is the approval of purchases that may exceed 50,000 and were not budgeted.
8.02, I move that the Board of Education authorize the solicitation of bids for pathogen removal remediation using a needlepoint bipolar ionization system.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. So we're moving on to 8.03, which is the 2020-2021 budget revision to the general fund.
8.03, I move that the Board of Education approve the 2020-2021 budget revision, requesting a $500,000 increase in general fund operating expenses to cover the district's portion of the CRSWC FY20 operating loss.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? It also passes unanimously. So 8.04, which is the second reading and adoption of policy BBFA, which is the board member conflict of interest and financial disclosure policy.
8.04, I move that the Board of Education approve policy BBFA, board member conflict of interest and financial disclosure policy with the recommended changes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. So we're on to 8.05, which is the second reading and adoption of policy GBCA, which is the staff conflict of interest.
8.05, I move that the Board of Education approve policy GBCA, staff conflict of interest policy with the recommended changes.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. So 8.06, which is the approval of meeting minutes for the August 26, 2020 meeting.
8.06, I move that the Board of Education, oh, hold on a second, I'm on the wrong page. I don't know, this is just written. Oh, I'm sorry. I move that the Board of Education approve the meeting minutes from the August 26th board meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions?
Aye. Oh, sorry. No.
There you go. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. So we're moving on to the financials. 9.01, the financials for June 2020.
9.01, I move that the Board of Education approve the payment of current expenditures and investments for June 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. So we're moving on to 9.02, which is the financials for July of 2020.
9.02, I move that the Board of Education approve the payment of current expenditures and investments for July 2020.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, it also passes unanimously. So we're now moving on to 10.01, which is public participation at board meetings. Just a reminder, right, we've moved public comment to the end, towards the end of the meeting. So Sean, Chris, do we have any public comment?
We do. There were, well, actually 4 comments submitted, but one of them was actually a duplicate. So we have 3 comments to read this evening. The first comment this evening is from Laura Horwitz. She writes, I have recently begun watching board meetings with more frequency and have a number of questions and concerns. First, I applaud you for addressing issues of board functioning. It's clear that board members invest a huge amount of time and energy into their roles and deeply care about our schools. Has the board considered setting a standard length of meetings, such as 1.5 hours? The unpredictable length of meetings and the fact that most are over 2 hours limits their accessibility to the public. would the board consider moving parent comments back to the beginning half of the meeting? I understand and support the greater focus on policy discussion. Nevertheless, parents already have a very limited voice in the board's process. I would like my comments to have a chance to be heard while board members and community listeners are fresh. Why do some board members leave when they wish instead of participating fully in the meetings? In the last several meetings I've viewed, I've seen board members come and go in ways that have been difficult to interpret. This is also out of step with other public bodies of which I am a member or observer. Especially as all of us adapt to virtual meetings, more transparency about what's happening off camera will help viewers like myself understand what is going on. Each of the above points speaks to ways the board can deepen its commitment to transparency and effectiveness. 1 second, please. Each of the above points speak to the way the board can deepen its commitment to transparency and effectiveness. The meetings I have watched have also included what seemed like both confused and contentious conversations about racial equity. I would like to implore board members to follow Stephen Covey's advice to first seek to understand, then to be understood. Specifically, in each meeting, I've observed Jason Wilson not being listened to by his colleagues. This concerns me not only for immediate issues of board functioning, but also because it seems to reinforce a negative racial dynamic our district has struggled with, whether board members intend this result or not. Mr. Wilson is our district's first ever African-American board member, which is shocking in and of itself. I think that context suggests that even if board members have different styles or opinions, there is much to learn here. I know the board is leaning into these topics, and as they do, I hope they will attend to naming and rectifying the current group dynamic that puts one voice against the others. I saw this tension summarized recently as follows. Diversity asks, who's in the room? Inclusion asks, has everyone's ideas been heard? Equity responds, who's trying to get in the room but can't? Justice responds, whose ideas won't be taken as seriously because they aren't in the majority. Finally, what happened to presenting the strategic plan in August? Those of us involved in the recent petition effort were told via email that the strategic plan was where we could expect to see our ideas incorporated and that August was the time that it would happen. And that's the end of her comment. The next comment is from Angela Flotkin. She writes, members of the Clayton School Board, thank you for your time today. I have been a parent in the district for 12 years. I am an environmental health advocate and, like you, care deeply about the health of our students and staff. Science and safety protocols surrounding the COVID-19 outbreak continue to evolve as additional studies are published and facts turn to fiction. We know by now that COVID-19 is primarily spread from person to person, mainly through respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks. As plans continue to be refined to bring mass students back into our classrooms, we need to focus on slowing the spread by addressing our indoor air quality, a strategy that is wise and health protective even in the absence of a pandemic. A recent study from MIT supported by evidence published in a March article in the Journal of American Medical Association suggests that small COVID-19 aerosols as small as 3 microns or less can linger for hours in the air. An unventilated, unpurified classroom can be a petri dish for the virus. A recent Wall Street Journal article suggests 4 tools that should be used in schools to reduce spread. 1, upgrade HVAC filters that can remove a large portion of airborne particles, such as MERV 13. Start HVAC systems earlier to allow more time for airflow and filtering before the school day begins. 3, add standalone air purification and change HEPA filters regularly. 4, increase outdoor air either by opening windows or through the HVAC bleed system. Additionally, it is important that we select EPA-approved disinfectants that simultaneously protect health while killing COVID. The Return to Learn plan on the district website highlights the use of a disinfectant product that contains one of the many ingredients we should be avoiding. It contains an ammonium quaternary compound, or quat. Quats have serious health concerns for anyone who uses them, teachers, children, janitors, including skin irritation, lung irritation leading to breathing problems, reproductive harm potentially affecting fertility and leading to birth defects, antimicrobial resistance, occupational asthma, and other serious consequences. Additionally, the plan cites that the product will be sprayed via an electrostatic sprayer. The risk of aerosolizing many of the disinfectants on list N hasn't been studied, and there are very few that are approved for aerosolizing, misting, or fogging. Currently, the EPA is still researching whether these strategies will create a healthier environment for our children to not only return to school, but to stay in school successfully by minimizing risk and the spread to the extent possible. Let's please not use our children as the test dummies when safer alternatives exist. I have consulted with a childhood medical expert in the community and am providing several resources that can help the district identify safer alternatives for cleaning. I am available for research to help with any of these issues. Thank you for your time, Angela Plotkin. And she included a number of resources along with her comment. Final comment this evening is from Becky Patel. She writes, I thank the district and the BOE for creating a Facebook event for this meeting that includes the link to the agenda as well as the live stream. Can you address why public comment was moved to the end of the meeting? Our board members sent the comments in advance of the meeting. I request that the board modify the comment policy under COVID-19 to allow for the public to actually speak in their own voices during the public comment portion of the meetings. This capability is available on Zoom webinar and other platforms, and I've used it as both a panelist and attendee. I'd like to hear open board discussion about the influence of recent petitions from within our community, student-led, teacher-led, and parent-led. Since passing the resolution against racism in our district, what have board members done to personally learn more about how to be anti-racist? And that's the end of our public comments.
Thanks, Chris. So we are moving on to board communication. So does anybody, I mean, I know that committees aren't meeting very much, but does anybody have any reports on board communication? Okay. Then I think does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Move that the Board of Education adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Appreciate it. Good night.
Night.